Hello, everyone. Welcome to an honest look. Hi, Rick.
Hi, Fatí. How are you doing today?
I am a little bit heated. Reframing things a little bit. I'm just going to pretend that I'm in a sauna
Okay.
talking to you. For some reason, that just makes it feel a little bit better. But yeah, it's extremely hot here.
Sure.
And
Yeah, it's
but,
unseasonably hot in Europe. It's unseasonably hot in Europe, isn't it?
oh yeah, it's insanely hot.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn this off so we can have better volume because I forgot.
Oh, it's the fan.
Right, so now I can truly be in a sauna.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean the fan wasn't too bad, but anyways, we wanted to talk about blind spots.
Blind spots. Yeah. What are blind spots and who has them?
Well, we all have them.
Right. Even coaches, even people that work on themselves all the time, do the work, get coached, go to a therapist. Every human being has a blind spot.
Oh, absolutely.
Many, not a blind spot, blind spots.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's part of. I mean, the whole definition of blind spots is basically you're not conscious of these things, right? So they become blind spots. Um, so how do you know you have them?
Well, when something happens or someone happens to voice something to you, or you're being coached, right? And you
Hmm.
have these sudden insights and realize, oh, wow, it's always been right there and I couldn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is typically how blind spot shows up. The moment that we finally see it, we see that it was always there. We just couldn't see it until then.
Yeah, and even a little bit. I get that part. Like it pops up, and there's another thing that through realization, kind of is I might have labeled it differently. Like I might not have labeled it as a blind spot. I might label it as oh, that's just a trait or whatever, not realizing that it truly was a blind spot.
Right, right. Or sometimes there's some level of awareness around it. Just going back to what you're saying,
Hmm.
around labor, but we have put it away as something that's part of our normal life routine. That something that we have normalized, right?
Yes.
So maybe we're aware of it, but we're not really seeing the impact of it or the repercussions on our lives, or we don't really realize that it's not per se normal. It's just being normalized
Yeah.
in our lives, right? We just accepted it at some point and we never questioned it. So,
Exactly. And some of that I know when I was doing behavioral workshops on personal effectiveness, we talked about blind spots as being those traits that are more habitual and unconscious to ourselves. And most of the time, others see them better than you do. And when sometimes when they're pointed out to you, it becomes a bit of a trigger, like an angst. It's like,
right,
what are you
right,
talking about? What do you mean I do this? Like,
right.
and of course, that's just a straight attack on the ego. And of course, the ego wants to be right, and therefore, it's going to argue that I don't have those blind spots. I don't know what you're seeing, right?
Right, and what, I would say that the manner in which those blind spots are being pointed out to us matters too, right? Because the more direct someone is, and if it's in an accusatory way, then we do what everyone does. We get defensive and we close off, and we're no longer considering what's being pointed out to us. But if the person that's pointing him out is skilled in delivering that in a way that we can receive it, so not in a blaming manner, right, or in an accusatory manner, and perhaps even with awareness and acceptance that the person is unaware of that, or that person is doing the best that they can in that moment, then that's when that pointing out is most effective, because now we're actually, while we're being triggered, we may still get triggered, we're still open to hearing what's being pointed out, or considering, even looking at what's being pointed out, which is why, like, a coaching setting is so effective, right? It's a place where we go and we see all those blind spots much more clearly than we would in our normal life, right? We were talking before we came on, we were talking a little bit briefly about family dynamics, and typically those are not the places where that's done in an effective way, or in a way that's being received, right?
Yeah.
By the person who, this is being said to. But typically there's actually like a whole dynamic that's going on between us and the person that, that's within our family, right? There's a behavior, and then there's a response, and there's a little bit of codependency. But when we are interacting with someone that we don't really have that much emotional connection with, right? We don't have that much history with, or we don't have some kind of a dynamic that's already, that's been always there, right? Then we're much more receptive to it, right? And that's where like coaching comes in, or a therapist comes in really strongly, because they have the ability to help us see things, not having an attachment to our own personal life per se. They have the ability to help us open up to the possibility of something to be looked at.
And part of that relationship, though, is that well, there's two things. One is when somebody highlights a blind spot to us in a casual conversation, it's not the atmosphere where there's permission given. Like
Right.
it's more of a, it's like, oh, it catches you off guard. Like,
Right.
but in a therapy or a coaching session, there's an implied permission that you are going to be open, and one of the things I do is like I ask permission for the client.
Right.
I said,
but there's also the willingness to,
well,
to do this.
two ways, absolutely, right? Because I think the first step in any coaching conversation is to ask for permission. Can I tell you something that might be triggering? Like,
Right.
that takes their guard away. Most people, when you're having a casual conversation, aren't going to say that. Can I say something that's really going to upset you right now? It's like they just go ahead and do it.
Right. I mean, I found, actually, this is really interesting, because this just came up for me. Like, I find that the least effective way to be able to see that is with the people that you're most connected to, right? Especially if the relationship is one where the communication is not that effective, and there's like blaming and pointing fingers going on, right? But sometimes it has happened to me that I meet a perfect stranger, or someone that I don't know that well, and they make a comment, it points at something, and it's not necessarily meant to be delivered as criticism or them wanting to point that out to me. It just comes from a place of complete innocence, right? Like, they're just pointing something out that's really obvious to them, or they make a comment that's really obvious, and they don't even know that they're maybe necessarily pointing at something within us, right? And so those also have been really effective for me, when someone that I barely know, that I just met, makes a comment like, wait a minute, oh, that's true. Because I don't take it personally at all, not knowing the person, right? I don't read into their comment as much as I would when I'm interacting with someone that I know a little bit better, that I know maybe it seems counterintuitive, but maybe that person has an interest, my best interest in mind or whatever, right? It's just some random stranger makes a comment and gets you thinking. That has not.
Yeah. And I do believe that, the more personal connections, I think part of that personal connections is the biases and opinions that we have, that we bring forward in those conversations. So we're not necessarily looking at things from a clarity point of view.
Right.
I also find that when we're looking towards blind spots and admitting that yeah, I could see that as a blind spot, or when somebody's telling you something, it really depends on my mood. Like if I'm in a low mood, there is really nothing that I'm going to be hearing as positive. You know,
Or
so
if you're feeling insecure, if you're feeling a little bit
all those things. Yeah.
challenged at that moment, yeah, if you have a lower vibration
Yeah.
in the moment, yes, there's no openness because it takes up energy, right? It
Yeah.
takes up energy, takes up that the level of bandwidth that you don't really have if you're not feeling at the top, or you're kind of battling with other things within your life. So that is a very good point.
And one of the key lessons that I learned through the training in behavioral work is the blind spots really start to show up when you're under stress.
Mm-hmm.
They or any stress mechanism, like being overwhelmed or anxiety, because part of them are used as defense mechanisms, so you don't really see them as unhelpful, because you're doing the best you can in the moment, and this just happens to be it. When others see it, they go, oh, wait a minute, hey, hold on, Rick, you're taking this too personally. I'm not taking this too personally. It's like, so so the mood or the frame of mind that you're in the moment, when you are under stress, and part of those blind spots are hidden in your shadow. We talked about in the past on some of our shows about shadow work, and we see the positive traits that we have, but we don't realize that we also have those, what we consider maybe blind spots or hidden in the shadow, that creep in when we're under stress.
Right. Well, I mean, we're running on survival in that moment, right? And so we're too close to anything.
We're going to grab anything we can.
Yeah.
That seems appropriate, right?
Right.
Yeah. So so go ahead.
No, and I would say one of the other reasons why I feel like oftentimes having a stranger point that out can really be effective is because that person likely has a very different view of the world, right? If they're not connected, they're going to be bringing in completely new perspective, right?
Yeah.
The people that we're surrounded by tend to be more in alignment with us, right? Tend to match our own vibration, right? And so we are in a bad mood, like you were saying, then we're attracting that kind of vibration, right? But if you are doing, first of all, if you're, like you were saying, doing the work within the frame of, I want to do this work and look into my own behavior, myself, and the things that I'm challenged by, and there's that relationship where there is permission to go there, then there's that openness, right? And there's that like willingness to receive a wildly different perspective, perhaps as well, right? And the other thing that I want to say is that sometimes, that can be tricky too, right? It's important to, in all circumstances, it's important to have done the work and to know ourselves, right?
Yep.
And to know how to distinguish when someone is being blamey, right? Is pointing the fingers because perhaps oftentimes that person is trying to deviate from their own blind spots or their own behaviors, right? So we can get triggered, but we can also, if we have done enough work, we can also stand in our truth and know whether or not that resonates, right? Sometimes that doesn't necessarily resonate when someone is pointing out something about you to you, because oftentimes people just project, right? They project their own view of the world onto you.
Well, that's true.
It's tricky.
Well, it's tricky because you're also doing the exact same thing on your side, right? But I think what you're highlighting though is how blind spots get concealed. They get clouded over by our own biases, and again, a lot depends on your frame of mind in the moment, right? Low moods, tend to cloud things, so you're not seeing things out of clarity. But if you are willing to look at it, and I love what you said about not taking it personal. Like, I think everything that we should be hearing if we didn't take a person as personal, we could look at it more objectively. Like, is it really true? Like, is it really true that this is what's happening? You know?
And this is key. What you're pointing to, it's key. Because I think what makes it difficult for people to accept those parts of themselves is the fact that, you know, we have the feeling we just have to accept it. Now, the invitation is to consider it, right?
Yes.
Is this really true? And ask this question that you're pointing to. Is this really true, right? To get past the trigger, because it's going to be triggering, right?
Yeah.
And then just step back from it and consider, ask the question, is this really true? Does it really resonate? And what I'm pointing to is that sometimes, yes, it's true. It's a blind spot. And like the feeling of having just discovered a blind spot is, you know, it's true.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
When it's a blind spot and you finally see it, you just know that it's true. But, you know, we all have had toxic relationships in our lives too, where like we're being blamed or we're being accused of things, right? And I think it's important to know how to distinguish those moments. And it's not about the trigger, it's about the moment that you step back, like you're saying, and you ask yourself, is this really true? Mm-hmm. And if you have done enough work on yourself, you're able to answer that and be very honest with yourself, because you're gonna step away from defensiveness, right? And you're gonna be able to just stand in the truth of what's being pointed out, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But if you step back and you ask that question and you honestly and truthfully know that you are open to receiving that truth and it doesn't feel true, then that can happen too, right? Not when something's being pointed out to us, sometimes it's not necessarily what the person is pointing out. That's what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It may not be a blind spot.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Even like it might not readily be identified by the label they're using.
Right.
But because like in Carl Jung's work, we're everything. So our blind spots, our shadow is everything that we deny in ourselves.
Right.
And so one of the things, because the world mirrors back to us all the time. So when I see, I don't know, somebody being aggressive, let's just say, okay. Now, in some personalities, that is a positive trait. But in my personality, that's a negative trait.
Right.
So I don't see it as a blind spot in the sense of, you know, me being sort of more calm and wanting more harmony, which is part of my trait. And so in my toolbox, being more bold and forthright isn't part of it. So that's part of my blind spot. When I recognize the fact that I am what I thought I was moving forward in a positive way was actually holding me back, because what I needed to be was be more bold and bright in the moment. And I was falling into what I call a prisoner of my preferences. You know, right. It was my comfort zone.
Right.
So just because it's noted as a blind spot doesn't mean that has negative connotations.
Right. And you know what? And sometimes something's being pointed out to you and you're just not ready to look at it. That's true too.
No, and I think part of it is the maturity level, right? It's not the maturity of yourself, but we always evolving and growing as individuals. And so as our level of understanding about ourselves increases, there's more of a willingness to explore some of these as they come up. Like I remember, you know, starting off in this journey way back, it's sort of like, you know, I'm just going to put that over here. I don't need to look at that. I don't need to look at that. Now that I'm sort of where I am right now, I'm more willing to pull a lot of these things that back in and start looking at them again. Oh, okay. I can be this and be very, very effective, like, you know, kind of a thing. So, and it's uncomfortable.
Right.
It's always uncomfortable because it's new.
It takes having done some of the work.
Yeah.
To be able to continue at all these different parts of ourselves. Right.
the minute you recognize it, whether you call it it's like, oh yes, I could see that as a blind spot right there. You don't have to do anything more about it. The fact that you've recognized it, it's going to it'll show up every once in a while, and then you go, oh yeah, there's that blind spot again, right? And as your level of understanding increases, your, I guess, things that you can do or handle become more and more, you become more stronger, for lack of better description. You're able to deal with it better, and then take those positive traits out of the the negative aspect of finding a blind spot. Because most of the time I find that a blind spot appears to me to be a negative side of my personality. And as long as I viewed it as a negative side of my personality, I would never grow forward with it.
Right. It's a place where growth needs to happen, right? It's a place where there's discomfort, right? I mean, I'm a seeker of blind spots now, right?
Oh,
I know.
are you?
I am. When I'm stuck in something, when I can't get myself out of a situation or a loop that I don't like, I know there's a blind spot there somewhere, right? Because when you think about it in those terms, you put the power on yourself, right? Yeah. If I know that I don't like a situation or circumstance as the result of something that I've done, right? And I stop looking for the reasons outside of myself, then the reason must be within myself. And if it's not obviously there or I can't pinpoint it, it's a blind spot.
Yeah.
So I look for the blind spots now, right? Was it always that way? Absolutely not. I was very defensive once upon a time. I did not like when anyone criticized me. I mean, it comes from having been criticized for a really long time in my life. And I think most of us have experienced that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Which puts us into that defense mode where we put the shield on, right? So yeah, now I'm a seeker of blind spots because I know that the more I see them and the more I grow, but it's not just about I just want to grow. That growth brings more ease into my life. So the more I see them and the easier my life gets. Because now I can do something about them, right? So growth is not just about the ego, I just want to grow and keep growing. Growth to me is the thing that allows me to live my life with more flow and ease and harmony, knowing that there is nothing wrong. There's only evolution and there's only learning how to do things in a way that it's a little more, harmonious. It's a little easier.
It's more truer to who you really are, right? Because part of blind spots can be treated as those barriers that are stopping your full expression, right? When we talk about getting out of your way, that's part of getting out of your way.
Absolutely.
Right. So, and one other trick again, it's being, having that self-realization piece where I notice, geez, I'm stuck on a perspective I can't seem to shift.
Right.
And I'm not moving forward. And sometimes
I'm not progressing or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So sometimes I might even go to my wife or somebody else that I trust a little bit and say, help me see this differently. Like what am I missing here? And because I'm so in the forest, right? It's sometimes somebody that's outside of you can have a different perspective and enough of you to separate you from your stuckness. And you go, oh, okay, that's possible. That's possible.
But you're in the forest, but you're also open to getting out.
Yes. Yes. Right? Like you got to recognize you're stuck in the forest, right? You got
to recognize that you're stuck in the forest. So this actually brings up for me, right? So on the other side of that, right? Yeah. When we see something in people that we love that is so obvious to us, right? And they are not ready to get out of the forest.
No.
What do we do then, right? It's, to me personally, that's another opportunity to work on myself, right? Because again, it's not about them, it's about you. How can I accept where that person is at? How can I interact with that person in a way that doesn't feel difficult for me, right? That doesn't make things triggering, doesn't, that feels more harmonious. And in my experience, and I'd be curious to hear how you deal with that. In my experience, it really is just about one thing: acceptance. Right.
Yes. Well, it is. It is definitely that's pointing you in certainly a right direction. Again, the whole key of awareness. When I'm aware, like, I'm not saying that I'm always aware of whatever I'm doing, but when I'm aware that something is rubbing me, like Carl Jung calls them rubs, right? When something's rubbing you the wrong way, it's my understanding that it can't be an outside in. It can't be them that's rubbing me. It has to be something inside of me that's projecting that rub out, because they're innocent. They're doing whatever they feel is right in the moment, right? There's something about me that's causing this opinion and looking at it as something's wrong, right? So, and of course, part of what might be triggered is I need to correct that, because it's making me feel wrong. Like it's causing the rub and fiction.
I mean, or I would say sometimes, in my opinion and in my experience, really what is calling us to do is for us to change the way we interact with that person. So not necessarily what's within me that needs to change, like, what is it that I can change in this relationship? How can I show it different?
Yeah,
right?
but it is regardless of how you frame it, it is still coming from within you. So like
it is still coming from within,
right?
you, absolutely. Yeah. But what I want to really emphasize is that it is not always about, let me go dig into myself and see what's wrong with me. Sometimes
no. That's the part I don't encourage anybody.
Right, right.
The only thing,
but sometimes there are things within ourselves that we really need to look at closely and correct, right? We're doing things that are making others uncomfortable. We're showing up in a way that is not serving us or others, that there is something to be looked at. Not, like, let's just be honest. People do behave in ways that are toxic, right? And we've had toxic moments, all of us, right? When we're triggered, whatever it is. But sometimes I find that can be a trap in self-development, to always be like, what's reflected here in me? What's wrong with me? Let me go dig and see what's wrong with me and what can I change? Sometimes it's not about what's wrong. Sometimes it's about how can you show up differently in this dynamic.
But that's part of what I'm putting. Like right. First of all, there's nothing wrong with you. Like when you understand, it's a thought produced world. What I'm looking at though is, what am I holding on to that I need to let go of to get a different perspective, to get a different insight in how I can move forward, right? So obviously something is blocking me, whatever, the angst is telling me about my thinking, not telling me what's wrong with me, just what I'm thinking about in the moment. So when I look at what I'm holding on to, right, then I can go, oh, okay, I'm holding on to what last week's conversation, whatever might be.
Or I'm holding on to this person showing up differently. I'm holding on to this person saying something nice.
Absolutely.
Me. I'm holding on to this person doing something that I expect them to do. Right?
Absolutely. Those are all just thoughts that they don't necessarily say anything that there's wrong with you. It's just that you're holding on to that, right? It's that whole screen thing, right? As long as I'm wearing those particular glasses, nothing's ever going to change.
Or I'm expecting that this person treats me respectfully, right? So if I'm still interacting and showing up with this person, yes, they have some work to do and look into themselves in the way they communicate or talk to someone. True, right? Because that's true too. And how can I avoid that situation? Why am I showing up in this relationship over and over again still, right? So it's, let's be honest, people are not, when we talk about everyone does the best that they can with the knowledge they have in that moment, there's different levels of consciousness too, right? We're on different levels, right?
It's all based on levels of consciousness.
Right. So there's acceptance there, right? This person is not going to be kind the way they talk to me. It has been proven to me over and over and over again. It rubs me off the wrong way. There has to be acceptance there. It's not about them changing.
No.
Them changing is for them, right? When they decide that they're ready for that. How can I avoid that situation, show up differently, not be in that relationship, let go of that person, let go of the expectation? If I'm not ready to let go of the person, how can I interact with that person without being triggered every single time and accepting that that's just the way they talk and I'm not going to like it, right? And if I decide to keep being in that relationship, which sometimes when it's a family member is really not an option, right? Then more part of me is not loving himself enough to continue to expose myself to that behavior, right? Is this like in every single instance or interaction or rub or trigger is an opportunity for us to think about our own selves in a different way.
Absolutely. And discover something about ourselves. Discover whatever you want to call it, a blind spot or a trait that you never thought you had, or a strength you never thought you had. That those are the opportunities that but when we embrace them differently, again, like when I find myself in a lower state of, like, our states of mood fluctuate like the ocean. Like, it's right. There's waves go up, the waves go down, right? So sometimes I'm high and sometimes I'm low. But when I do catch myself in a low state, and this is, to me, that's always been the trick in the self-discovery part, is noticing, oh shit, I'm in a low state. Well, of course, everything that anybody's going to say to me is going to be taking in from a different perspective.
Right.
Because when I'm in a good state, so many different things just rub off me, right? They're saying it the same way, but it's sort of like, oh, okay, there they go again, whatever that might look like. But when I'm stuck in the trough, that's when I have to be careful. That's when I know that I'm not seeing the world the best way possible, and therefore I am not being effective. And that's part of the work of discovering. When somebody does point out something to me as maybe a blind spot, I'm not going to receive it well. Totally.
Right.
I don't know anybody that ever does.
No, because you don't have that openness.
No, you're definitely, the lower the mood, the more closed you are to any possibility. And as a matter of fact, I am more stuck on a perspective of what I feel is true in the moment. And this is what I love about Byron Katie's work is when you do find yourself entangled in that, is to ask the fundamental question: is it really true? And how do I know it's true? And then as you start working through her dialogue, you start to reflect, oh, well, maybe it isn't actually true. It's, and 99% of everything really is tainted.
It really is. And I want to actually talk about a different aspect of this, right? So let's say now we're open to seeing our blind spots. We saw huge blind spots, like, oh, I've always, I've normalized this kind of behavior, let's say, and now I see it. What in my experience starts to happen then, because life brings you what you need, that those same situations and circumstances now start to show up more. Maybe they show up more. Maybe now we notice them because we have that awareness.
Well, that's part of it. That's
right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I personally, at some point, I got stuck on that. I was like, what is happening? I see it. I get it. This kind of toxic behavior is something that I just was used to having around me. Mm-hmm. But now I see it. Why is it there still? Why are all these people still attracted to me, right? Why do I still attract this kind of behavior? And it wasn't until I realized that behavior was going to show up again and again and again until I knew how to not react differently to it.
Yeah,
right?
neutralize it.
So neutralize it. The awareness piece is great. Now I see it, I recognize it. What am I going to do about it differently this time? Right? Oh, there it is, that person that's really talking to me in a way that I really don't like. It's showing up in this person or that person or at work, right? Because it shows up in many different ways all of a sudden, right? Because now you see it. It's going to continue to show up for as long as you react to it in the same exact way, or like you just see it, but then you don't change anything in your interaction with it, right?
Yeah.
And I personally realized that it really was about me letting that go and moving away from it, right? Not accepting that kind of behavior or conversation or that kind of toxicity in my life. And oftentimes I found myself in front of really difficult decisions, right? Because you can either be exposed to it and be completely, immune to it. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not, right? Or you can just completely remove yourself from the situation. And sometimes that requires you to make choices that go against the grain, right?
But yes, but from my perspective, when those decisions are better made with more clarity, like,
of
right?
Course.
Yeah.
Right.
So one of the things I was hearing in your dialogue there was the notion of I'm kind of losing the thought. There's the acceptance piece, but there's also one of the reasons that we stick to something, like we hold on to that thought, is because we think there's some value in it. So there's some value. So you're seeing it all the time because there's some value in you seeing it.
Right. There's a part of you that has to change, right?
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed yet. And that's kind of what. And it's not necessarily what I also learned is because that could be self-blaming to me, right? It's not necessarily that that's a true reflection of me. I often found that what it was being reflected was my own codependency to that kind of.
That's what I mean. Like there's something of value that you're holding on to.
Right.
It again, you're only being reflected whatever thoughts you're holding on to, right? So you just happen to be, that's what it is. Whether it's insecurity, most of we should do a show on insecurity, by the way, because to me it's the original sin. It's the root cause of so many different things. Codependency, insecurity, right? So and part of us not looking at ourselves closely is our insecurity, like the uncertain piece of it, right? Because so what am I actually going to be exposed to? What am I going to learn? Like, will I be able to handle it? I don't know. But
I mean, I love that you brought up insecurity and codependency. We use that word so as I feel like maybe sometimes people don't really know what we mean by that. But codependency is basically the behavior that you have developed around a certain relationship dynamic, right? So if a dynamic is really toxic on one end, then there's a response to that kind of behavior. But oftentimes what happens is that the response, so the person that's now codependent in that dynamic, can also be toxic, right?
And a blind spot. And a blind spot.
And it's absolutely a blind spot, because maybe we developed that to defend ourselves as children, right? But then it has become part of who we are, right? And within that codependency, that response, right? That's codependency now, there's an acceptance of that behavior that's being reflected to us, right? Yeah. So I'm insecure, I'm not worthy, and therefore I just put up all the defenses and I respond by screaming and shouting and defending myself, right? And now I'm in a pattern that I am completely blindsided to, because I too am like pointing the finger out the other person, right? So there's codependency. no matter where that toxic behavior has started, we can really get entrenched in that behavior and become toxic ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's a fascinating topic, blind spots. Because there's so much depth in, just when you think you've discovered them all, another one shows up, right? It's sort of like, so it's a progress. Like it's like levels of understanding. There are infinite number of levels of understanding, right? You're always growing. But part of moving forward is allowing yourself and your acceptance of yourself that you do have blind spots. And I love what you say about, I'm a blind spot seeker. Like, go exploring, do a self-discovery journey, and be very reflective. I mean, part of it is being what do they call it? A conscious observer of what's going on, and part of what I teach is noticing your feelings, because your feelings will always tell you what's going on in the world. So when you're feeling upset, well, then it's like, oh, okay, so what upset feelings have I got right now? Kind of thing. Where's my attention? And I like how you highlighted, everywhere I look, it's like there's that toxic thing going on. There's that like all that, it keeps showing up.
The moment that you become aware of it, right? But I do want to leave people with a little bit of hope, because it sounds like we're just going to be seeking for blind spots forever, right? But what I experience, not just working on myself, but also working with clients, is that the more you do this kind of work, and the easier it gets to spot them and to shift them.
And let them go. Yeah, absolutely.
And the beginning is going to be a little bit thicker, right? We have a lot of cleaning up to do. There's a lot of like fighting up against ourselves. But the more we do this work, and the more we're willing to do it, and the more we release the resistance, the more we move and shift. And actually, it becomes a little bit harder to find those blind spots, right? Because we have moved and shifted a lot of things. That doesn't mean that we don't develop new ones, right?
Well, I'm not sure about the development part, but because part of what like from Carl, like we are whole. I think as we discover more and more of them, as we dig into the cave or the shadow, right, and start to shine more light on that, we become more of a whole of a person. We become who we were meant to be in the first place. And as that shines through, there's less and less barriers that keep popping up. And when they do, as you say, might show up as blind spots, we're able to deal with them more quickly and recognize what they are, because all they are is blockages. They're just roadblocks that get in the way.
But what I mean by developing is, as we grow and evolve and challenge ourselves with new things, right, that we have never done before, there's different things that come up, different blind spots that we develop or show up. Maybe when I call it show up, that would have never been there before had we not challenged ourselves.
Oh, that part, yes, absolutely. Just because you're raising your level of consciousness doesn't mean that you're at a point. You're just going to have different blind spots now. You're going to have different challenges. They're just right. So it's all part of the journey, the hero's journey, right? Absolutely. There's always challenges, and
there's so much to talk about here. Like
always, yes. So So I appreciate today's conversation. I want to encourage people that are listening to us or watching the show, tell us what you want to hear. If you want to hear more about blind spots and possible solutions or whatever, drop us a chat, drop us some comments, or email us. All our contact information is in the descriptions of our shows. And what else can they do?
Share the love.
Share the love.
Share the love. Just send this episode to someone that you feel needs to hear this, and subscribe, review us. Just help us amplify our impact and keep showing up.
Yeah. And on a personal message, I know both of us have links within our website. If you want to have a personal conversation with either one of us and talk about blind spots or anything else that's coming up in your life, please reach out. We're always available.
Absolutely.
All righty. Hey.
Amazing, Rick. Have
I
a
hope
good rest of your day while I go into my dinner time.
I hope it cools off a little bit more for you.
Yeah, me too. I'm completely drenched right now.
Okay. Thanks for sharing.
Until next time, everyone.
Bye now.